Well, good morning and welcome to Compass. My name is Rory. I am one of the teaching pastors here, and your campus pastor, Luke Davidson, is sort of getting a day off to relax today, so we're super excited for him to get that opportunity. And so Luke asked me to come over today and sort of wrap up, put a bow on this series that we've been doing for the last 3 weeks called Screen Time. Now, if you're new with us in person or this is your first time tuning in online, you might be asking the obvious question, why are they talking about my phone in church? Why are we talking about screens in church? And our goal here in this series is not to sort of be the people who say, you know, technology is awful, we should get rid of technology, we should all go back to writing on stone tablets with hammers and chisels. That's not our goal here. But our goal is to be evaluative of ourselves, to sort of ask the question of what are our screens doing to us emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. Because as people who are followers of Jesus, people who are pursuing God in some way, shape, or form, we don't want to miss the voice of God in our lives. I mean, I hear from people all the time, I would love if God would just speak to me and say something. And so often we are so distracted that the opportunity for that becomes more and more difficult. On January 26th of 1956, a man by the name of Martin Luther King Jr. was pulled over in a traffic stop. He was caught going 30 in a 25, and he was pulled over, and instead of being given a simple ticket, he was arrested and sent to jail. Now, he spent the entire night in jail and was released 24 hours later. Now, to give you some context of this event occurring, this was right at the beginning of what we would know as the Civil Rights Movement. Martin had just been elected to the Montgomery Improvement Association. This is just a month after the Rosa Parks situation had happened in Montgomery. Things are starting to sort of bubble up in that world. The bus boycott is happening at this point in Montgomery, Alabama, but the city has made it clear they are not budging on anything. So Martin Luther King Jr. has been arrested, he's been released, and he's now sitting at home. And at this point, day after day, hour after hour, he's receiving phone calls that are death threats. Not just to him, but to him and his friends and his family. He's getting letters dropped off at his home that are death threats. As he walks outside, he hears death threats. He is at one of the lowest points in his life. And the way that MLK has told this story in past sermons is that as he was trying to sleep that night after he had gotten home from jail, he was so full of anxiety and fear and worry. So he went down to his kitchen. He made himself a cup of coffee, which is not the way to solve anxiety late at night. He made himself a cup of coffee and he sat there, stressed, worried. And the story goes that he began to pray, that he said out loud, God, I'm trying. I feel like I'm doing everything that I can. But God, I'm losing strength. I'm not courageous. I'm faltering. And the way that Martin Luther tells it is that he had this moment where as he was sitting there, he heard the voice of God. And this is what he says he heard God say to him. Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. And I will be with you even until the end of the world. Now, some say that that moment, that night, is when the civil rights movement was truly born in the United States. But I want to ask us an interesting question this morning as we think about that story, as we think about the legacy, the life of a man like Martin Luther King Jr. What would have happened if Martin Luther King Jr. had a smartphone? He's receiving death threats. He's up late. He's anxious. He can't sleep. He's sitting at his table. What would have happened if Martin Luther King would have had a smartphone? Instead of praying and hearing from the voice of God, might he have spent the next hour scrolling Instagram? Maybe instead of hearing from the voice of God, he would have posted a status on Facebook to let all of his friends and followers who care deeply about this how stressed and anxious he was. And he would have sat there and waited for the likes and the comments to flood in. The statements to say, oh, I think you're great. You're so great. Don't be stressed. Don't be worried. Might he have wasted hours on Twitter or TikTok just mindlessly scrolling? See, this is what's at stake when we talk about screen time. Not that screens are awful, but that if we want to be people who hear from God, who have these experiences with God that are so meaningful and matter in our lives, that we can get caught up in all the wrong things. See, God has promised that he is speaking to us by his word and by his spirit. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, are we listening? And I think that most of us want to listen. The problem is just we have so many distractions. So as we wrap up this series, here's what I want to do today. I want to help you think about why this matters. And I want to give you something super practical to walk away with and to feel optimistic and hopeful about the screens that we have in our life. Not to feel pessimistic, not to feel like there's no hope, we're just sort of going to be mindless zombies walking around staring at our phones, but to give us some sense of optimism and hope about our screens. So to start, I want to ask you all a question. What does it mean to be a disciple in the digital age? What does it mean to be a disciple in the digital age? Now, if you're new to church, or maybe you've gone to church for a long time, you've heard that word disciple, and you're like, I don't know what it means. Doesn't it just mean someone who says that they're a Christian? Here's the best way to define what a disciple is. A disciple is an imperfect person who invites Jesus into every area of their life. To be a disciple of Jesus is not to be perfect. It's not to get everything right. To be a disciple of Jesus is to be someone who looks at Jesus and says, listen, you can have authority in every area of my life. Not just spiritually, not just Sunday when I'm at church, but you can speak into my relationships, into my mental, my emotional, my physical health. Jesus, you can speak into every area of my life. And the problem is that many of us have trusted Jesus to be the Savior of our lives, but we haven't trusted him to truly be the Lord of our lives, to have true authority. And this is why a guy named Paul writes this letter to Romans, to these Roman Christians that we've been referencing this whole series. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And so as we end this series, what I want to do is help us have a framework of what it means to follow Jesus in the digital age. So as we look at this scripture, we have to keep in mind that Paul's writing to first generation Christians. I don't know if anyone in the room here you're the first Christian in your family. That's how I am in mine. Paul's writing to these first generation Christians going, I want you to understand how to follow Jesus with everything that you have. So he writes them these words. He says, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy. And we talked about this. This is an encouragement. This is not a, hey, you should feel guilty about everything you've done or the things you haven't done. He says this is about God's mercy. He says to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So what's really at the heart of this entire passage is God's mercy and his encouragement for us to begin to pay attention to what is going on in our minds. That there's influence that's going on in the world around us. There's influence. There are things that are speaking to our minds, to our hearts, and to our souls. And believe it or not, whether we know it or not, those things are affecting the quality of life that we have, they're affecting the quality of relationships that we have, and they're affecting the quality of spirituality that we have as well. See, we could say it this way: a digital disciple knows that the life you live is a direct reflection of the thoughts that you think. A digital disciple knows that the life you live is a direct reflection of the thoughts that you think. And you're probably thinking, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds good. I think most of us probably know that. It's very similar to the statement that you may have heard growing up. I heard this growing up. It's the statement, you are what you eat. Has anyone ever told you this? You are what you eat. And people used to tell me this all the time. My parents would tell me this. Teachers would say this. I didn't really believe it. I knew it to be true. I know that if you eat fatty, greasy food, you eventually can become a fatty, greasy person. I knew that it was true, but not enough for me to actually change my behavior. Right? Someone would look at me and say, you are what you eat. And I would go, I know, but Hostess cupcakes are so good. They would say, you are what you eat. And I would go, but have you ever had those Swiss cake rolls or a zebra cake? If you are what you eat, just call me Little Debbie at that point. You've heard that. We've all heard this phrase, you are what you eat, and yet it doesn't really change us. We know it to be true. I remember my mom all the time when I was in high school playing sports. She would ask me, are you really going to eat a whole pizza before you go to sleep? And I would say yes, because carbs help me rest. Listen, we know statements like this to be true. We've heard them. But it's not enough for us to change the way that we live. A digital disciple knows that their life is determined by their thoughts. But it's not enough for us to always figure out what to do. Because there's an objection, an obvious one. And maybe some of you are already thinking it. It's this: I can't control my thoughts. If I could control my thoughts, we would be in a much different space. This wouldn't even be a conversation. I can't control what just comes rushing in and out of my head. I can't control my thoughts at all. In fact, some of you feel like you're sort of at the mercy of your thoughts. And I think what Paul is trying to drive at with these verses, with this letter to these first generation Christians is this truth, is that your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Your life is always moving in the direction of your strongest thoughts. And this is where our screens come in. Because if we're honest, and if any of you have evaluated your screen time over the last few weeks, it's easy to recognize that we probably spend more time looking at a screen than we do looking at anything else. And we can actually do something about that. Paul would later write these words to a church in the city of Corinth. He would tell them simply this: take captive every thought. Now, maybe you grew up in church, you've heard that phrase. What Paul is simply saying is that you are not actually at the mercy of your thoughts. You're not just sitting there sort of passively having thoughts going in and out and you can't do anything about it. His idea is when a thought comes into your mind, you can actually grab hold of it. This is the metaphor, the language that he's using. You can grab hold of this thought and evaluate it. If you've ever wrestled cattle or done anything like that, that's the picture that he's painting. You can grab it, evaluate it, and go, should this be here or not? Does this make me more like Jesus or less? Does this make me a better husband, a better spouse, a better wife, a better son, a better daughter? Does this make me more of who I want to be? And if not, you actually have the choice to toss it out. But Paul doesn't just say take every thought captive. He tags these words to it. He says submit it to Jesus. Submit every thought that you grab and evaluate to Jesus. And then he says you can actually do something better with them. To a church in Philippi, he writes these words: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. It's not just enough to grab the thoughts, evaluate them, and get rid of them. He actually says evaluate them, get rid of them, and then think differently. He says you actually have the capacity in your brain, and psychology has proved this to be true, to develop new ways of thinking. To not just be the same person who deals with the same difficult thoughts over and over and over again. You can actually develop new pathways. You can change your thinking. And I know what you're thinking. Great. How do I do that? There's one easy way. You have to change your inputs. This is a biblical idea. You actually have to change and alter the things that are coming into our hearts and into our minds. And this is why our screen time matters so much. See, oftentimes we think it's the big decisions that we make that can change our lives. We think, you know what? I know how I'm going to solve my screen time problem. I'm going to put my phone in a drawer for a week. All you're going to do is crave your phone. And when that week is up, you're going to go right back to the same habits you had. The truth is the way that we change our lives is not by the big decisions. It's by the little everyday decisions that we make that consistently change the direction and the trajectory of our life. This is not just a biblical idea. Social science is actually beginning to prove what the scriptures have been saying for a long time. There was a study done at Macomb School of Business that recently found, get this, that simply having a smartphone within reach, even if it's face down on the other side of a table, reduces your cognitive capacity. In other words, I have a cell phone in my pocket right now, and studies say that this sermon is just dumber because of that. And some of you are like, that's the truest thing he said all day. Studies are showing that even just having this thing within reach is making your brain less intelligent. Another study showed this, that the more you use Facebook, just Facebook, this is, if you work for Facebook, I'm sorry. The more you use Facebook, the lower your mental health and life satisfaction. And if we're honest, we didn't need a study to tell us that. All you have to do is spend enough time on enough posts and read enough comments to go, yeah, that sounds right. One study showed that adults who stayed off Facebook for 1 week were happier, less lonely, less angry, less worried, and less depressed than those who stayed on it. Our inputs matter. The things that we allow to come into our minds, into our hearts, into our souls matter because they directly affect the way you live. This is why things like comparison and bitterness and anger and loneliness are becoming the top characteristics of the next generations. But here's the truth. It's still true of us adults right now. It's what happens when you see someone post a photo of their beautiful family on the internet. And what they haven't shown you is what's going on behind the scenes, because you then look at your life and go, their kids look so great. My kids just caught the kitchen on fire. Their marriage looks perfect. I haven't talked to my spouse all day. We're both at work. Their dogs look so well behaved. Mine just ripped up the couch. And the thing that begins to sit in is comparison. You begin to wonder why your life can't look that good. Or when someone shares a status about how overweight they feel, and yet they weigh about 99 pounds, which we can talk about how that post was already made out of insecurity, but now you, as maybe a healthy person, is beginning to evaluate your own weight. They look like a twig, and if they feel fat, well, then I ought to feel fat. And insecurity begins to run rampant. Next thing you know, you've spent thousands of dollars on a home gym you didn't even need. Or these moments where you see a post, you see something that looks like news that seems credible, that says there are massive killer bees 5 foot long in East Texas, and they're coming right this way, and before you know it, you're at Home Depot buying every can of Raid that you can find. You're terrified, and then you find out that that news source wasn't real at all, but you've bought out Home Depot of every can of bee spray they have because fear has simply taken over. Comparison, insecurity, and fear, they don't come out of nowhere. They begin to show up in our lives because of the inputs in our lives. Which leads me to a question that I've been asking myself, honestly, long before we did this series. But this series has brought it back up. And maybe it's a question you've begun to ask yourself as well. And it's this question. When I think about my phone, my tablet, my computer, am I using my screen or is my screen using me? And honestly, there's an easy way for us as Christians to figure out the answer to this question. There's a moment in the life of Jesus when he's questioned by a teacher of the law. And the teacher looks at Jesus and he says, of all the commandments, which one is the greatest? Which we don't get the weight of that question. That's a huge question. There's 613 commandments, rules, regulations. He gave Jesus 613 options. And those of you with anxiety about decision making are getting itchy right now. He says, pick one. And Jesus can't even boil it down to one. He gives him two. This happens in Mark chapter 12, verse 30. He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Jesus takes 613 rules, regulations, and commandments, and he boils them down to two. The commonality between them is one verb, and it's love. He says, the most important thing you can do in your life, the verb that has the most weight and the most power to change your life and the lives of people around you, is love. This is what the life of a disciple is meant to be marked by. Love. Not church attendance, not generosity, not the power and the willingness to serve. No, your life is to be marked by one verb, love. A woman named Dr. Kara Powell, she's the executive director of Fuller Youth Institute. She actually suggests the question that we should be asking about technology is this: does technology help us love better? See, technology is amoral. It's neither bad nor good. But technology becomes a hindrance when it interferes with the verb that Jesus elevated above everything else: love. See, the truth is that a digital disciple knows if their screen isn't helping them love God and their neighbor, their screen is using them. See, technology becomes a problem in our lives when it sabotages how we love others. It becomes a problem when our followers become a replacement for real friendship. Technology becomes a problem when people feel like they aren't actually having conversations with you anymore because the posture you're in most of the time is this. When you consider your Twitter feed, your Facebook posts, do people see them and feel more loved, or do they walk away feeling more judged, chastised, more called out, more shamed? When you post something or you share something, do you just sit and wait for likes and comments to roll in? Because deep down, we need some sort of affirmation. See, a digital disciple knows that if their screen isn't helping them love God and love their neighbor, their screen is using them. So, to end on a more positive note, because I think we get it at this point, right? Our screens, if unchecked, can cause trouble. I want to give you some real key ways that you can use your screen for love. First, you can use your screen to connect with God. We've talked about the YouVersion app, the Compass app. There are things like the Bible Project that create great videos for you to understand the scriptures. One of my favorite right now is a thing called Lectio 365. If you don't have this on your phone, I would highly recommend it. It has changed the way that I pray. I thought I understood how to pray. I didn't understand. I feel like I hear God more clear now than ever. There are incredible apps that have been created to help you have a better relationship with God. Another way that you can use your technology for love is to invite people to church. You have social media accounts with more followers than I could ever imagine. You're connected with more people, which means you have more influence to invite people than you ever realized. You can use those platforms to share stories of how God has been good in your life. See, some of you would be ashamed to know that when people see your social media, they don't know that God has been good, they just know that you're unhappy. You can use your platform to share with people how God has shown up and been good and gracious. When moments of injustice rise up in our world, it's not enough to just share a graphic or to share something. The power is by you reaching out to someone, whoever the group that has experienced injustice may be, to simply say, hey, I see you, I hear you, and you are loved. So how do we make sure that that's always the case? When you walked in today, on the seat in front of you, there was a card. At the top of it, it says Digital Rule of Life. Now, some of you are still sitting on it because you want to ignore that it's there, and I totally get it. But for the rest of you, I want to invite you to grab that card right now. If you've never heard what a rule of life is, here's simply what it is. A rule of life is a set of convictions and rhythms that help us keep God at the center of everything that we do. A rule of life is not a new thing. It's been traced back to the 15 and 1600s where in monasteries, monks would have a rule of life. It wasn't a commitment to being silent, although that could have been part of it. It was a commitment. It was a schedule, a regiment of how they would live every bit of their life. And we're going to have the physical cards down there. We're going to put a QR code. If you're like, I'm just a digital person, I want to make sure I have access to it. We're going to have that up there so you can see it as well. But here's what I want to invite you to do. I want to help you walk away with a real tangible way to live this stuff out. Because it's great to spend 3 weeks talking about our screens, the difficulties with them, and how we want to live differently. But if we don't make certain commitments to ourselves, to our families, to our kids, to our spouses, we're just going to go back to who we were. So if you have that card, I simply want to help you walk through it real quick. This would be a great thing for you as you go off to lunch today, as you sit around the dinner table over the next couple of days, to begin to talk about this card. I'm just going to share with you what's on mine. At the top, you have 2 spaces, a space where you can put a vision and a verse. My vision when it comes to technology is simply this. I want to be transformed by Jesus, not by a screen. I want to be transformed by Jesus, not by a screen. The verse that I've paired with that is the one we've been teaching out of for the last 3 weeks. Romans 12, verses 1 through 2. You can do whatever you want. This is for your family. It might just be for yourself. You might be like, my family, they do pretty well with technology, but I'm struggling. Here's some of the commitments I've made. When it comes to my relationship with God, I'm going to read a Bible every day, but because I know myself, I need to read like an analog physical Bible. If I read a Bible on my phone, as soon as I get a notification, I'm out. When it comes to my personal health, when I go to sleep at night, my phone is not taking a nap next to my pillow. My phone's going to charge on the other side of the room. When it comes to my relationships, anytime I'm at a meal or I'm at coffee with someone, whether it's a member at Compass, it's my wife and my kids, my phone is not coming out. I'm not even going to sit it on the table next to me. When it comes to church, I want to leverage the platform that I have, the relationships, the influence that I have, that people would know who Jesus is, that they would be welcomed into a place like Compass. And when it comes to work, and this might be the most practical one for some of you, I'm just going to start leaving work at work. I'm not going to be the dad who's at dinner scrolling through my emails trying to make sure everything is replied to. I'm not going to be the dad replying, unless it's Drew or Luke, to text messages late at night. See, my challenge for you is not to become more religious and have more rules and regiments for your life, but to simply sit with your family and go, who do we actually want to be when it comes to technology in our family? Last week, we said that your phone is simply a tool. I want to invite you, go ahead and pull your phone out of your pocket for a second, or out of your purse, wherever you've hidden it. Those of you that are like, I don't even have my phone with me, we're so thankful you're here too. You're like, we got it week 1. We didn't need 3 weeks of this. We said that this phone is simply a tool. And for some of you, this has been the tool that you've used like a hammer. It's been the thing that you've used to beat people over the head on social media. Maybe for some of you, it's been a mirror. It's been the thing that you look at when you need dignity and worth and value. But believe it or not, one of the things I use my phone for the most is a flashlight. Every time I have to go into my kids' room late at night, I can't turn on all the lights. If I don't, I'll fall over everything. So I just turn on a flashlight. I want to invite you on your iPhone, your Android, if you have an Android, turn on your flashlight real quick. We can dim the lights in the room a little bit. See, what I believe to be true if we allow God to transform us in our relationship with technology, we don't just become people with tools, we become people with the light. We become people because of our own transformed lives that other people will begin to look at us and go, I want to live like that. I believe that this room is full of light bringers. People who are willing to help bring the gospel to the furthest ends of the world. People who are willing to tell their neighbors, their friends, their family members about the good news of Jesus. See, I believe that almost everyone in this room has the capacity to be light in darkness, to bring life change to the people around them. Can you imagine what good news, what good things might happen just here at North Richland Hills if we began to be transformed and help other people transform? See, I imagine that we would see more people show up to this campus than we knew what to do with. I imagine that God would bring kids here in droves, that students would show up looking for a sense of hope, that every Sunday people would get baptized, that kids who are starving and hungry would be fed because of our church, that people who walk in with addictions would find recovery, that people who are in the foster system or who are orphans would begin to find families and homes. Not because we did more, but because we allowed ourselves to hear the voice of God. So you get to choose how you use this tool. Will you be formed by Jesus, or will you be formed by the world? It is completely up to us. Let me pray over you this morning. God, we love you. We're so thankful that we get to gather as a church family, and that in these few moments on a Sunday morning, you can speak to us. So God, would you help us? Would you help us leave this space with newfound convictions about what it means to be the light of the world? Because when we are the light of the world, when we are truly disciples in a digital age, it can't be hidden. People's lives will be changed, and ours will as well. So God, we thank you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen.